Yeah, he's come all the way from Manchester. He's a student at Salford University. But joining us in the studio, Luke Dudley is here. Good afternoon, sir.
Good afternoon, Joe. I'm going to have to stop you If you say Salford one more time, the people of Salford will descend upon Warwick and tear you limb from limb.
Salford. I've said this about you before, that you've picked up a Mancunian accent a little bit.
Yes,
in
it
places.
sort of comes and goes depending on where I am in the country. But
where you are.
Yeah, it does... It does linger.
Okay. Thank you for coming down and joining us today, though. Really appreciate that, because obviously I know, as we were saying, it's bank holiday weekend, so the roads have been slightly chaotic, but we appreciate you coming down. Obviously, you... Whereabouts do you live in sort of Manchester in perspective?
I live in Salford Quays, which is just about a 5-minute drive from the city centre.
So you're near Media City?
Yeah, near Media City, and it's sort of on the edge of Old Trafford. If you know where Old Trafford Football Stadium is in Manchester, I'm about 5 minutes from there.
Okay, and obviously you were there Monday night. You finished your exam studies now.
Yeah, I finished exam studies and just finished work.
So talk us through Monday night for you. Where were you when you first sort of heard the news? What were you doing?
Sure. So I was actually, in fact, just getting ready to go to bed because I was on 3 days of shift work, and I saw the news break on Twitter like everyone else. But it's about 25 to 11.
Right.
The concert finished at 10:30. It was about 2 minutes after that where it all kicked off, and then very quickly the news broke on Twitter that something was happening. People were posting, saying something's going down at the Manchester Arena, but nobody knew what. And it was, it's one of those things. When breaking news happens, a lot of the time you actually see it on the television for about an hour, just because people don't know what's going on. But Twitter obviously is just people posting everything. But of course, nobody wants to speculate. And I had a friend working there, and it was when when I commented I posted something on Facebook saying, I don't know what's going on in Manchester, but hope people are safe. She commented on it. She's saying she was working there. She was ready to she was getting ready to take the concert out of the arena.
So she was working at the arena?
She was working at the arena, but she was backstage waiting to get the show out.
Right.
So, and she said that, she heard people panicking, people running out of the arena as they were getting ready to go in. But of course, nobody knew what was going on. And there was no sort of, to start with, no official evacuation. It was for 10 minutes that they told her that she had to leave. And that's when on Twitter, pictures started coming in and videos started coming in. And you realised very quickly it was more than just a balloon popping or a speaker blowing. Because that was people's first thought. You don't want to jump to the worst, because actually you don't think that someone would go to an arena full of children and blow up a bomb. My first thought was perhaps the speaker's gone and it's caused a stampede. If people panic, if there's 20,000 people in an arena, they've all got to go out the same kind of way. It could be a crush. So,
I wanted to ask you on that. Have you been to the arena, the Manchester
I haven't
arena?
been to a concert at the arena, but I've been to the box office area where the explosion took place.
So can you explain that for us?
So Manchester Arena is on top of Manchester Victoria Station.
Right.
And there's a couple of entrances, but the main one into the box office is you go up some steps from Victoria Station, and there's a big concourse area. It's probably about 50 metres across in either direction, and that is where, much like if you've been to the O2 in London, you've got just before the bag checks, there's a big open concourse. And once you go through there, my understanding is after you go through there, it's where, like any stadium, there is, just food halls and food outlets and merchandise, etc. And where the bomb went off, so we're being told, is in the box office area. So just as people coming out of through past where the security checks were, that's where the bomb gone off.
And how wide is that space? I suppose it's hard to describe.
Yeah, I can't say for certain. I know how large the concourse is, but I don't know what beyond the security area. I don't know how much space there is.
Okay, so Monday night. So you hear from your friend on this sort of this comment that something was happening. So what's your initial? What happened? What do you do next?
Initially,
do you stay in, or?
I stayed in because it was still speculation at that point. The thing that triggered me to go out was about 5 to 11 initially, when you knew something was up. I saw a video on Twitter, and the timestamp was 9:30. But I think if you allow for the British summertime, it's 10:30, and it was of a dash cam footage of someone parked in a car park about half a mile away from the arena. But you could just see the Manchester Victoria Station has a giant bubble, a bubble roof. And you could see that. You saw a video, that glow, and then you heard a bang, and then you thought that's not right, and that's it's too early for someone to be able to fake it. Why anyone would want to fake it, I don't know anyway. So that was my oh my goodness. And then about 11:15, then Greater Manchester Police had released their first statement saying there's been an incident and there are fatalities. And that is when I decided that I needed to go out in my car, because people were already offering on Twitter. People offering hashtag Room for Manchester was one of the first big things that the city did. But I didn't have a room. I just had my car, and I know that there's going to be a lot of people travel far and wide, and even just from the surrounding areas. And Victoria is a travel hub, and that was closed. So if people want to be getting trains home or trams home, so we have a tram network in Manchester, they weren't going to be able to get home. So I went out in my car and just want to see if people needed to get anywhere, really.
Can I ask, though, I mean, we all like to think in a situation like this that our response would be to help, for example, be it in the arena and be in the area and be someone, as we heard about Chris Parker, the homeless man who sat and cradled people as they passed away, obviously to what you did, which was being perhaps slightly further away but going out into the city. Was it just a completely spur of the moment, there wasn't even a discussion, I'm going? Or was it something that you had to think about? Because we all like to think that we would, but I question whether in that situation, the idea that you're going out into something where you've heard that there's been an attack, there's been fatalities, it's a vulnerable situation, was it just an immediate thought of, I'm just going to go? Yeah,
the only thing that stopped me for a fraction of a second was when they said avoid the area, because that's their police's first reaction is there's going to be a lot of emergency service, you don't want to get in the way. But at the same time, these people have got to go somewhere. There's a lot of people in the city who don't know. I mean, Manchester's not massive. You can travel a lot of places on foot, but if you don't know the area, you're going to be wandering for hours. So when I thought about the decision to going out, it was about 5 minutes. I scribbled on some A4 sheets so I could stick them up in the windows to say if anyone needs a ride, and then I was gone.
So talk us through what happened next then. So you leave your sort of your flat. Yeah. Where do you go? How close to it do you get?
So,
what sort of are you stopping? Are you just driving around?
I just head in the general direction of the arena, and as I get as close as I can, I reach the first cordon, and that's when I pulled up next to the police line. Traffic was sort of turning around in the road, and there was a family talking to a policeman, and they had a mum, dad, and 9-year-old daughter. I later discovered, and the policeman was trying to give them directions to somewhere which, when I could hear, was the other side of the city. So already I thought that's a long way to walk. At this point, I didn't know if they'd been inside. I had no idea what their connection was, but they needed to get somewhere. And it turns out they were looking for their car. So I called out through my window and said, don't walk it. Get in and I'll drive you. And obviously, you never quite know if people are going to accept that, first of all, because I'm a complete stranger.
And there's the shock of what's going on.
And the shock as well as what's going on. So, the people don't know if people don't know who you are, you don't just randomly jump into people's cars. That's not what you do in the city. If you're going to go into Coventry now and someone said, just get in my car and I'll drive you where you're going, it's right. It's just, it's madness. So the part of me was like, I don't know if I'm going to get anyone, because I'm not a licensed taxi driver. I don't know, and they got in, and the policeman came over and said, they're trying to find the car, and we think it's parked up in Deansgate, which if you know the geography of Manchester, is it's probably about mile and a half away from where the arena is.
Okay.
So the family get in, and we spend the next 2 hours driving around trying to find. It's midnight by this point. We try and find the car, and we go out to the edges of the city centre and then drive in on the road that they came in on, because they come in from North Wales and they didn't know where they'd parked. They'd just been shepherded into a car park by a marshal, because like at the football and when the arena's on, people just claim patches of land, put on high-vis jackets and direct you into their car park and charge you £5. And that's what had happened. So,
and just to confirm, they had been at the concert.
They'd been at the concert. Yeah. So it was when we were driving around is when I learnt their story, and they'd been there and the encore had just happened, and they said they had two explosions, but that may well be the shockwave travelling around the narrow corridors. And the father's initial reaction was actually to stay put, because they saw everyone flooding back into the arena, and he had a level head. He didn't panic. But it was when others started to say you have to get out was when they left, and their first realization that something was really up was when they got into the corridor of the outside of the arena, and it was smoky, and there was people panicking, and I don't know which way they came out, but they said that it was just the scenes was just chaotic.
Did they say what sort of things they'd seen?
No, and I didn't want to ask them either, because
of course.
You just don't know, and the story was already enough to give you goosebumps.
Yeah.
And so they walked. It turns out they'd actually got into a taxi, and the taxi driver helped them look for their car for about 45 minutes, and then they got dropped off, and they were walking around again, and that's when I found them. And so we spent the next 2 hours looking for their car. And as I say, we came in from all angles of the city trying to see if we can get there. But the problem was the cordon was so large. The cordon was nearly a mile circumference around the arena. And so you couldn't get anywhere near. You couldn't get near the arena. So we came to the conclusion about 2 o'clock that actually we think the car's probably inside the cordon. And we asked policemen, you couldn't get anywhere. And you weren't going to get there for at least another 24 hours because of the scale of the incident. And it was still unfolding at that point. The news was still coming in as we were driving around. It was like fatalities, and it was 19, and then it was like 50 injured. And the scale hit home, and the mum in the back was crying, was sobbing, because her 9-year-old daughter, she was there with a 9-year-old, and now we know the youngest victim was 8. It really hit home. So about 3 o'clock, we decided that it was probably time that or about 2 o'clock actually, we decided it's probably best if they head home and come back on the train tomorrow, or on Tuesday, and see if they can find the car. So we drove back to North Wales that night, and they got home. But yeah, it wasn't. Then the next morning, it was the breaking news was still unfolding. It was just it was horrible to hear.
What was? I mean, because I think we talked about this earlier, that it's very difficult when you see things on the television or when you're listening to things on the radio to really understand this event, because it must have been obviously incredibly surreal for the people of Manchester anyway. But what was it like being in a car with people who'd been in the arena, who'd heard this explosion, who'd been witness to this attack, but then also driving through the city at these hours of the morning after the attack? What was that like?
To be honest, it was a bit strange to begin with, because actually the dad was so chatty, but that was the shock. Like they were all clearly in shock, and we just spent loads of time just chatting about what they do for a living, where they're going on holiday, just everything but what had happened. After he'd said what had happened, we tried to turn the attention away from that, because don't want to keep reflecting upon it. It's not going to do you any good. But it was strange driving around a city where I've never seen so many policemen and ambulances, and there was just lines of ambulances all heading towards the arena, and it was just something else, and when it wasn't the police cars, the rest of the streets were practically deserted. There was nobody else on the roads. I mean, I know it was 2 o'clock in the morning on a Monday, but actually generally in Manchester you'd expect to find taxis and clubbers, and they just weren't out. I think they'd all gone, because I think the city was in such a state of shock that people just didn't want to be out and about.
And when you were driving through, were there many other people like this sort of family that you encountered on the side of the road? Were there many people sort of wandering about, or were people mainly being sort of taken cared for?
People were going to... So anyone who was coming out of the arena, generally they were heading to the other side. There was a couple of refuge points set up at the near Victoria Station. There was loads of hotels around there taking people in. So actually, I don't think many of people, if they had all the locals had all cleared out by that point, because like you say, it was about an hour afterwards that I got to the cordon. So I think anyone who was walking and local, they've gone. Anyone else who was affected by it or had their car elsewhere, I think had gone to the refuge point. I didn't see many other people walking, apart from any of the odd stragglers leaving the club. Leaving clubs. So the city centre was almost dead, apart from people involved with what was going on.
So you drove this family home to North Wales on the night. I mean, what time did you get home in the end after that?
I think I've got a Snapchat, which is a record history of my time in this planet. About 4:10 in the morning, it was me at home. So, it was 4 hours after 4.5 hours after I set off.
Yeah.
I mean, in all honesty, when I went out, I thought, there might be people in Stockport, which is sort of in East Manchester, or in Didsbury, and they just couldn't get on the trams. That was my initial thought, but. But when they said North Wales, I didn't realise people travelled that far to gigs.
Yeah.
But I was like, well, it's still got to get you home. So that was the decision I took. They had work and they had school, which unbelievably I found out the father did go to work that morning at 6 o'clock. I mean, he didn't stay long. He really wasn't well, but he went to work, and which I think is just crazy.
Have you had any contact with them afterwards? Or
I spoke to them both on the Tuesday because I was actually asked to go onto a programme for the World Service at the Vigil on Tuesday afternoon, and they wanted to speak to him as well. So I phoned him up, and they were trying to look for the car. He come back into he looked for the car with his brother-in-law, and the good news is they found the car about 7 o'clock or 6 o'clock that evening. After another 2 hours of looking, and actually annoyingly, we must have driven past it. We're so close. I reckon we've come within 200 meters of this car, but because it was nighttime and because they were in shock and they couldn't remember, we just couldn't get to it. But they're not. It's really affected them, and surprisingly, as someone who wasn't there at the attack, and I've just picked up a family. It's surprising I'm surprised how much it's affected me as well, and actually everyone in the city. Everyone.
In what respect do you feel like it sort of affected you? In what?
Because it's so overwhelming to hear, just a story firsthand. And as I was driving back from Wales, the details emerged, and the adrenaline has got out of my system, and then you're just overcome with emotions. And again last night when I found out that someone at this event I was at last night was working at the merchandise, and they were 20 meters from the blast, and if they were any closer, they may not be at this event and winning awards and talking and being with friends.
Sorry, this was someone at your radio awards last night.
No, this was someone at the Journalism Awards at the uni last night, and they were there, which I didn't know at the time, but I was told through a friend, and they may not have been there, and my friend who was working backstage, she could have come in through that front entrance. She may not have been there, and and it could have been any time as well. My family due up to watch a show at Arena in 2 weeks' time. It could have happened at any time, and it's that what if scenario, which is, although it sounds completely insane, and you think, why does that make you sad? It's that what if it could have been anyone, and it could have been any time, and also because they're just kids. They had no political agenda of their own. They had nothing that if it say it was you had Lee Rigby was a soldier, that was their motive as a soldier. These are kids. They've done nothing wrong, and so that really, really hit home.
We're limited by time, Luke, which is a shame, but I just want to bring a few things up quickly. You were just saying here, and I think this is just a really interesting to what we were talking about earlier, and it's interesting to talk to you even sort of as a second eyewitness account or whatever, but we were talking earlier about the ramifications of something like this, that it doesn't just stop at 22 people who were killed on Monday night. It's not just contained into that tight sort of temporality in that space, that actually it affects these families for years and years to come, of the victims and the people injured, but also, as we said earlier, there was 15,000 plus people at this concert. You're talking about a family who weren't injured but were there, and you're sort of talking about you've been texting every day and how difficult they're finding it.
Yeah, I mean, as I said earlier, it's that what if scenario. Anything could have changed. If they left the concert before the encore, they could have been at that point, which is what they were almost planning on doing, but it was just the pure joy in his daughter's face that they said they didn't go. What's another 10 minutes?
God, that's scary to think that
in that scenario, life was another 10 minutes, because they would have put them right at the heart of it. And that's why I think it's so deeply affected them. And as I was saying in the break, that they were going to cancel their holiday, which is in a couple of weeks' time, because they just don't feel right going away. But there's 15,000 people all feeling the same thing. And I thought I might as well say, if anyone is listening and they were affected, there's a website that the gov.uk have put out, which if you're a witness to or you're affected by it, you can visit, and it's under their guidance page. It's at gov.uk/guidance, and there I think you'll be able to find the Manchester attack support. But yeah, it's just, I
think it's also brought to what you said here about the community aspect as well. The fact that this is a family who are complete strangers. You don't know them. They live in North Wales, and the fact that you're saying that even as we come to the end of this week, you're still having everyday texting conversations with these people, that you're still discussing what happened, both with the dad and the mum as well. I mean, that in itself is quite an incredible thing.
You can't I could not just drop them off in Wales and never speak to them again, because they were so open in sharing their story, and you became part of their evening, and I just couldn't leave them knowing that obviously at the time when they were travelling back, they were in a state of shock. So they need someone to talk to about it. They may not want to be so open now post with someone they haven't, who someone that wasn't there. Whereas at the time, because they were so open and shared, we now, I think, have that kind of connection where they feel comfortable talking about it.
I mean, we're against the clock a little bit, so I hate to rush, but I just want to talk about the few things to talk about. Just in the last few days, being in Manchester, being at the vigils, what have the vigils been like? What's the atmosphere like in Manchester at the moment? Because obviously we were talking about responses. What's that been like?
I mean, I've been in Manchester for coming up on 3 years now. Never have I felt more part of a city or a community in a city as I have done the last 2 or 3 days. The vigil on Tuesday was, I think, one of the most moving things I've ever been to, and you see it on the television after these events all the time, and then until you're actually there, you don't realise to what extent and how passionate people are. But there was just people bursting into applause. Everyone, all religious backgrounds, race, were coming together. There was at one point at the beginning of the vigil, members of the Manchester Sikh community marched in as together, carrying banners of support, and that got however many thousand people there were applauding. And there was a really, really powerful poem which I encourage you all to go and listen to, and it was read by, I think, Tony Walsh, and it's called "This Is the Place," and it's powerful. Powerful.
Luke, thank you for joining us. And I know obviously there's been a lot of stuff going on, but credit to you for doing what you did, because we all like to think that we might do that, but you never know whether you would, and it's part of this community aspect and you've been a part of that. And thank you for joining us.